Hi, good evening everybody. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. First I want to thank the Nitzanim Shul for allowing us to have the class here. And my cousin Shlomo Rivlin, he's responsible for allowing us to be here. And I want to especially thank my wife Bina for encouraging us to produce some of the programs we've had so far. And she is a constant source of encouragement. Since the last time we met, a few things happened. First of all, last Wednesday, we had Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer, and my cameraman was very enthusiastic about taking the Possible Use seminar. He actually signed up, so he's not here tonight. So I turned on the camera. But also last Sunday, we did a hands-on CHESED project at Yad Eliezer. We had 16 people, and everyone really had a good feeling about doing the CHESED that they were involved with for the day. And one of the people signed up every month. They'll bring their kids and their kids' friends. And another person that came is involved with the yeshiva, and they're going to encourage the yeshiva to go monthly as well. So, I don't know, it just gives us a good feeling that even though we're just starting out, that we're already making some progress. Anyway, tonight's goal is to present practical ways and suggestions to incorporate happiness into your life, right? The title of the seminar has been The Secret of Happiness. It's not a real secret. There's been hundreds of hours, hundreds of studies, millions of hours by research institutes trying to figure out what is the secret of happiness. They do come to certain conclusions, and they all have these idea of three things: faith, family, and community. If you have a strong faith, strong family, healthy family, and a good community, that is part of the secret to happiness. Some other research that's been done, they come to these conclusions that 40% of the people that are happy mainly because of what we call nature, or Teva Rishon. First, nature, it's due to genetics. Somehow or another, the families have always been very healthy and happy, and we're going to call that nature. Now that is not in our control. There's nothing much we can do about that. There's other significant factors, and that would be significant life events. People who've had significant life events do, and it can cause some happiness. Problem is, it's usually not long term. It's short-lived, and that does account for another 40%. Here's an example. Let's say, for example, somebody won the lottery. So they found out after 6 months, he's back to the original level of happiness that he was at. On the other hand, someone who became a paraplegic, unfortunate situation, could have been an accident, and you would expect that he would be very unhappy. And sometimes it does take a toll on their happiness. But what they find is that 6 months later, he's back to his original state of happiness that he was in before the accident. The truth is, if you really think about that for a second, it means that the paraplegic is actually happier than the guy that won the lottery, because he's back to his original, and he went up, where the other guy, the lottery winner, went down. Okay, the third category which we're going to actually focus on tonight, and that is life choices. These are within our control. This is what we're going to call nurturing, which is second nature, or Teva Sheni. This is something that is within our control, and we can acquire happiness through our life choices. As an introduction, I actually want to paraphrase what a famous rabbi said, and this is only because of my humility. This is the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, his introduction to Mesilas Yesharim. He says, "I'm not here to teach you anything new, but here to remind you of what you already know. The only difference is that I'm hopefully going to present you with a different way of thinking about things." The first principle that we're going to run, it's pretty much going to run through the evening, is the idea of Lefum Tzara Agra. According to the effort is the result. Right? Nothing comes for free. It's going to take work. If someone wants to be happy, they have to put the effort. Excuse me. I want to spend a few minutes reviewing. We had two speakers in the past. We heard Rav Gav. By the way, if you go onto our website, yiboneh.com, you'll be able to see his video clip. And I encourage you all to see it if you haven't seen it. And even if you had seen it, it's worthwhile seeing again. Rav Gabriel Friedman gave over the 5 levels of pleasure, which is called a flagship seminar. It was developed by Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal. He was the founder and the Rosh Yeshiva of Eshet Torah, who I had the privilege to learn under, where I received my ordination as a rabbi at Eshet Torah. We define the man as a pleasure seeker, okay? Meaning the prime motive that causes him to act or not to act is based on, is this going to bring me pleasure? It could be an act or a thought. But the ultimate fundamental key in what we do is it going to make me feel good? The choices we make, is it going to bring me pleasure? Now, one of the main points that he pointed out in the shir was that pain and pleasure are not opposites. I mean, we asked the question, people, what's the opposite of pain? So everyone said pleasure. Well, what's the opposite of pleasure? Pain. No, they go hand in hand. They're on one side of the spectrum, and it would be either indifference or being numb, comfort, which is the opposite. Again, according to the effort is the reward, and we're going to go through it again. Lefum tzar agra, right? Pain and pleasure are on the same side of the spectrum. In, I guess, vernacular, in American English, we say no pain, no gain. I'd probably say that also where some of you guys come from. So I'll just go through some of the steps that he took in the shir. We emphasized the different levels of happiness, and on each level there were 3 things to focus on. One is to become an expert in that level of happiness, focusing on the results, and to avoid the pitfalls of counterfeit pleasures. And we climbed each level, or should I say, we started at 5 and we went up to 1. So each one of these different types of relationships, we had what's the word? There was a trade-in factor. You know, how much are you willing to sacrifice to go up the ladder? Call it an upgrade. So we started with the lower to the greater. So the first was physical pleasures, then we went to love, then meaning, creativity, and of course the top was spirituality, the wow moment, the willingness to be inspired and be awestruck. So the ultimate pleasure we concluded with was the pleasure one derives from connecting with the Almighty. Transcendental. Anybody hear of TM? What is it? When you hear TM, what does it remind you of?
Hare Krishna, something like that.
Or transcendental meditation? No. I'm going to give you a whole nother definition, a mind frame for TM in a few minutes. First, the Torah defines man as a nefesh, a soul. We're transcendental. This is what separates us from the animals. We long to unite with our Maker, and we develop, and in order to develop an intimate relationship with our very source. This is something the Kli Yakar speaks about in Parshas Lech Lecha, that the Jewish soul, the soul of Abraham, longed to come to Eretz Yisrael. Lech Lecha means to go to yourself. God was instructing him to find himself at a place that he would show him. This place we know as the Temple Mount. The Even Ashtia, the foundation stone, is located there. This is the place where the physical universe came from. That's what Even Ashtia means, the foundation stone where everything came from. This is also the very place where heaven meets earth. So not only did the body, the physical part of who we are, come from that place, but also our soul. This is where heaven meets earth, and this is where the souls enter into the physical world. I just want to stress that if anybody wants to find out more about the Temple Mount and the Even Ashtia, the foundation stone, you can go to our website. It's on the last page to the far right, And we have links to the right sites to become more educated. You can take a virtual tour. That sums up Rav Gav's shiur. The second part of our series was with Rav Yom Tov Glazer. And his presentation was an introduction to the Possible You seminar. And he explained how we are really spiritual beings. These spiritual beings also have, let's say, he mentioned voices. So we hear voices. We have an inner voice that's talking to us. Sometimes it's healthy and sometimes it's not so healthy. I just want to mention, a special mention to Rabbi Hillel and Chaya Lester at the Shalev Center, because my wife and I do go to couples groups over there, and they've been really helpful in helping us deal with these voices and the stories that we tell ourselves. Usually they serve these stories that we tell us, unfortunately, serve to what's the word I'm looking for? To mess us up, you know? I mean, we really want to succeed. And I'll give you an example, because Yom Tov Glazer gave in his seminar some examples. But I just want to finish with the Shalev Center. Hillel and myself, we're thinking about it. We're working on a possible seminar for single people, a pre-marriage workshop. And this is one of the things I mentioned earlier, faith, family, and community. So this is how we want to also help the community or the individuals with the family aspect. Anyway, getting back to Yom Tov Glazer and what he mentioned. So we call them these voices. Here I have it right here. I'm going to tip my tongue. Pitfalls, and they present challenges. And one of the goals is to reframe. This is another thing that a Rabbi in Eshet Torah, Rabbi Zelik Pliskin, the guru of happiness, framed that word, reframe. And if you can reframe and you can unleash the potential, the real potential that we have to help create more healthier relationships. So one of the main components of healthy relationships is to create an attitude of gratitude towards your partner, and also judging favorably is very important. And this is the process he walked us through last night. Again, his presentation is also on our website. Here's where I mentioned the negative voices. So he presented us examples of some of the negative voices that some of us have in our head. Right? We were children, we were growing up, we had experiences, and we have these echoes in our head that maybe we weren't good enough, we were unloved, we weren't loved enough, we were abandoned. And then we have this second voice, and that's also could be catastrophic. It tries to compensate for all those negative thoughts, but it only sabotages. That's the word I was looking for earlier. It sabotages our ability from having successful relationships that we really desire, but we end up acting out in non-constructive ways. So Rabbi Glazer showed us why we need to start why we need to start examining the way we think, and allowing ourselves the freedom to perceive things differently, which is one of the things we're going to try to attempt here as well. When we think of things differently, it can actually bring us towards a state of clarity, resulting in the attitude of gratitude that we so desire, and the happiness as a result. Now I want to bring in an important angle, and most of what I want to present tonight is actually based on this idea. I mentioned earlier, no pain, no gain, lefum tzara agra. We were slaves in Egypt. I mean, that's not a big chiddush, but what does it mean to us? Is it real to us? So on a national level, we look from a historical point of view, okay, so we can make it real. But so many mitzvahs are there to remind us of our enslavement. You got to ask why. This time that we were in Egypt was very troubling. It was very painful. Actually, the word itself, Mitzrayim, in Hebrew, is from the word mitzar. Mitzar is a very tight, constricting place, suffocating. It's very confining. This is the worst kind of bondage one can experience. Now, we've all probably experienced some type of bondage, some type of pain in our own lives. We've actually probably created our own personal hell. We were chained, we were enslaved to our base desires. And we've ruined a lot of relationships because of what we call the monkey on our backs. Also something else, misery loves company, and somehow loves to share that misery. If only we had a healthier concept of our essence, we could actually remove ourselves from this prison of our own making. Problem is, because I'll tell us that a prisoner cannot free himself, right? He needs someone from the outside to help free him. So it's usually what we're going to call a power greater than ourselves. So once you're free and having experienced the freedom and the immunity, you can look back and actually feel grateful for where you are today. Similar to 12-step programs. After having had a spiritual awakening as a result of those 12 steps, one can begin to carry the message to others, which actually reminds me of the symmetry in the idea that we have a mitzvah to learn Torah. And how do we know we have a mitzvah to learn Torah? There's a limud, there's a learning from the word vilimadatem and the word ulamadatem. We learn out that those who are obligated to teach, they're the ones who are obligated to learn. And also from vishinanthem, you shall teach your children. Rav Noach Weinberg, blessed memory, said that the highest level of learning is when you're actually learning in order to teach, which is again the whole concept here of sharing, giving. I know that when I prepare for a shiur, I put a lot more into it. I expect questions. And there's another Talmudic statement that says, by certain Rabbeim, who do you learn the most from? From your students. Now, how can that be? Because many of the questions that are asked, as well as the preparation time. The Torah commands us, actually I want to mention something very important, because we're going to be talking a lot about mitzvahs that seem to only apply to men. Trust me, we'll get to plenty with women as well. But I heard recently, one of these research departments on happiness, they said that first of all, women, single women, are more happier than single men. They said, married women are also more happier than married men. And the last thing is a little bit funny when you think about it, that widows are happier than the widowers. Anyway, getting back to, so the Torah commands us to be kind to others. We're supposed to care for the stranger, the widow, the orphan, because once we were slaves. This is the idea, and I'm going to mention it in the second set of tablets by the commandment of Shabbat. But this is also the commandment to take care of the orphan and the widow, because we were there. We're supposed to empathize. How are we supposed to really feel that we experienced it? So the Torah commands us every year, once a year on Pesach, to actually mentally, emotionally, and even sometimes physically act out leaving Egypt. Supposed to really experience it. As if what? As if you're leaving Egypt right now. Again, we talk about Egypt being a Meitzar, a tight place. The creator of the universe knows that this is what we need towards healing, to be able to relate to leaving Egypt for hope's sake, as well as for experience sake. He gave us guidelines to help awaken us out of those 49 levels of tumah, of contamination. We had descended to the lowest of lows. And in order to become uplifted and get out of it, so he gave us the tools. Again, Rav Noach Weinberg developed a series called The 48 Ways. The 49th way is review. But anyway, so we're supposed to experience this once a year on Pesach night, and twice a day when we repeat the Shema, right? We're supposed to experience Geulah. Think about, because we do mention the third paragraph, which is reminding us that God is the one that took us out of Egypt. We're supposed to try to really make it real. And the commandment of Shabbat, which comes every 7 days. It also mentions, right? I mentioned about the second set. So the first set of tablets, the commandment of Shabbat, is God telling us, I created the world, I love you, I want you to rest, I want you to have some peace. The second set, and I'll read it, Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Sometimes we forget there's a second set of tablets, and they're a little bit different than the first in the wording. The commandment's still the same. In order to hit this point really home, I just want to quote the Vilna Gaon. This is in his commentary on Mishlei, on Proverbs 4:13. It's short, it's a one-liner, but you should take this for the rest of your life. He explains the entire purpose of our existence. And what is that? He says it's to overcome our negative habits, to work on, we call tikkun hamidot, to work on our character traits. To be, these are my words, to be more sensitive to others. I'm sure everyone has their own little netiya, their own little, way of expressing this. I recently read in the Zohar, it wasn't in the Zohar, it was someone else who quoted the Zohar, what actually is the difference between a tzaddik gamor and a tzaddik she'ena gamor, between a completely righteous person and someone who's righteous, but he's not completely righteous. He says that a completely righteous person didn't commit any transgressions in his previous transmigration, Gilgul, previous life. Whereas the righteous person had committed transgressions, and he's here now to metaken them, to fix them. I'm going to assume that everyone knows what Rabbi Akiva said about the greatest principle in the Torah, but I'll mention it again. Any volunteers? Rabbi Akiva, the greatest principle in the Torah, he says, you should love your neighbor as yourself. And everyone says, oh yeah, but there's two more words. Ani Hashem.
Oh, sorry.
He says, you should love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. And I'm mentioning this for a reason. Also, we all know the famous statement that Moses said to Pharaoh, and probably many in the civil rights era as well, let my people go. But what's the rest of the sentence?
To worship Hashem.
So they can serve me. So I'm mentioning these for a reason. First of all, we already mentioned it's a mitzvah. It's a commandment to bestow kindness upon others. Where do we know that from? We'll talk about that in a second. But the concept here, v'ahavta chamocha, I have to love someone else as I love myself. So it's like a mirror image here going on. And not only that, Ani Hashem is somehow put into it. So how do we understand that? So the concept here is one should love and cherish his brother, just as he loves and cherishes himself with his own money and his own body. So too, another way to express it, just as he would want, I want for him. And just as I want for me, I also want for him. Ben Azai, he says the main principle of the Torah, Klal Gadol b'Torah, is from a different verse. But I'm not sure there's really any difference here. He says the verse is, imagine it, the greatest principle of the Torah is when God created man, he created him in his image. Is that much different than v'ahavta chamocha, Ani Hashem? There's another source towards the fulfillment of those acts of kindness that comes from Exodus and Shmos 20. And I'm bringing this up because it's very interesting about one of the words that are going to be used here, and we're going to actually use one of the texts to go through it a little bit. It says, and you shall teach them. God is talking to Moses. You shall teach them the statutes and the laws and show them. Inform them the way in which they must walk and the way they must, and the work they must do. There's work. According to the work, remember, this being happy is going to have some work involved, but the rabbis understand when it says inform them in the way they must walk, that has to do with the character development. That has to do with tikkun hamidot. That has to do with the chesed, the kindness that we're obligated to share. The next verse says, and if you do this thing, and as God commanded you to do, then you'll be able to endure. All this people should go to their place in peace. I'm going to read them in Hebrew a little bit. So it says, "V'hodata et haderech yelchu bo," and you shall inform them of the derech yelchu bo, they shall go in. Ve'et ha'ma'aseh asher yasun, and the work that they must do. And the second pasuk, the emphasis I want to put on v'yachalta amod. They'll be able to stand. They'll have a presence. V'gam kol ha'amazeh, for this whole people. Al makomo yavo b'shalom. That they will come to their place in peace. So, a place could be a physical place, and place is also, a real peace descending upon a person. So this really applies, first of all, on a personal level, certainly on a national level, and I'm going to say even on a global level. This is where I want to pick up and present practical ways to incorporate several key concepts as part of this presentation by Yibaneh, whose mission is to encourage and empower the community to do more chesed and mitzvahs. So there's going to be 3 principles I'm going to mention. Number 1, gratitude, showing appreciation, being appreciative. Love, we define love as seeing or focusing. It's actually the feeling one gets when you focus on the virtues, the positive aspects of the other person. And number 3, putting it into action, meaning follow through with tikkun midos, kindness, good deeds, which will result in deep satisfaction. Remember I said earlier, Lefum Sara Agra, according to the effort is the reward. Now it's not going to come easy, but I'll tell you it's worth it. You'll have a much healthier life. So, our name is Yibaneh, and it has 2 aspects. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, right? The world is founded upon Chesed, and the other aspect is Yiban HaMikdash, to build the holy place. It's not a real contradiction at all. Now, research has claimed that I mentioned this earlier, 3 main factors in acquiring happiness and sustaining it for a long time. And that's faith, family, and community. So I think these are acts of faith. These are obviously things you do in your own family, and certainly wherever you can in the community. But this is based on God. One of the aspects of one of the commandments is to imitate God, to follow in His ways, to take on His character traits. So we learn out 4 different acts. Dressing the naked, lahavish aromim. God dressed the naked. He dressed Adam and Eve. Visiting the sick, levaker cholim. To visit the sick, God visited Abraham shortly after his circumcision. Comforting a mourner, lemenachem avel. Right? When Abraham passed on, God came and blessed Yitzhak. Burying the dead, livkor metim. So Moses, nobody knows where Moses is buried, even to this day. Who buried Moses? God Himself. Some of the commentators list those acts of kindness under the category of to walk in His ways, as I just mentioned, l'lechet bidrachav. And some say it's just a general admonition to have good manners and character. The idea is that the kind of love and kindness that you bestow upon your brothers and sisters is the same love and kindness you would bestow upon yourselves with your own money and your own bodies. What you would like to do, what you would like someone else to do to you, this is what you should do to others. Now the main problem comes up when you have an unhealthy idea of yourself. When you have low self-esteem, when you have these voices in your head that are constantly, I keep forgetting the word I'm looking for, sabotaging you in your relationships. What if you're not truly happy? What if you lack the clarity? You're not healthy. How can you bestow what it's a mirror? So you're giving them what you think they want when you're not even sure what you want is so healthy. So I have no doubt that an unhappy person is going to face these challenges in their relationships. They're going to have a hard problem with love. They're going to have a very difficult problem bestowing kindness. And they're going to have to work it through. It's no wonder that the Chofetz Chaim, who's one of his famous books called the Mishnah Berurah, but he wrote a book called Ahavas Chesed, the love of Chesed, the love of love and kindness. Now it's based on a verse, Min Micha 6:8. It has been told of thee, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Hagid lecha adam, ma tov, ma Hashem doresh mincha, ki im asot mishpat v'avas chesed, hatznei lechet im elokecha. Now, knowing that, there's some copies in the back. There's a piece of paper, and if everyone can grab one, we're going to go through this little piece. This is going to be, I'm going to say, mind-boggling, earth-shattering, and it could be that you've all heard it before. Again, I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not here to teach you anything new. I'm only here, hopefully, to connect the dots. I'll try my best to translate it in Hebrew into English. This is based on a story in the Gemara. Evan and I, we learn at the Emic Learning Center. We have a really good time there. I encourage anybody and everybody to go to the website, the Emic Learning Center, it's oneword.com, and find out when there are shirim. So this Gemara in Brachos is describing a situation where Rabbi Yossi was traveling on the way, and he needed to pray, so he went into a ruin in Yerushalayim, maybe on the outskirts of town, and he started to pray. And he noticed he must have been on a very high level. Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, was outside waiting for him. So when he was finished, he had a conversation that ensued, and he said he learned 3 things from this conversation, based on the questions that Eliyahu asked him, based on the answers he gave. I'm not going to go into all those details. It's just one particular idea, and that was, he says, one time while I was walking on the way. We're going to focus just on those words. Now, I might as well fill you in on one of the aspects of the question. So he said one of the reasons he went in there because he was afraid, he was in fear of people who were passing on the way would interrupt him. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, told him what he needed to do from that point on. Anyway, so there's a question. Pam achat hayiti mahalek b'derech. One time I was walking on the way. Yesh lakshos. You can ask. Ma'arich lomar. Why does this story go at length to explain hayiti mahalek b'derech? I was going on the way. Dai lomar. It would have been enough to say Pam achat niknasi lechorba. One time I went into the ruin. So this is I should have mentioned who this is from. This is the Ben Ish Chai, it's the Ben Yehuda on the Gemara, and the Gemara is in Brachos, Daf Gimel Amid Aleph. So he says, Bir Tefilati Kohen Gadol. If you look at the explanation with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest who prayed every year, and he would pray that the people who are walking on the way, who are passing on the way, that God should not listen to their prayer when they pray it shouldn't rain. We all know Eretz Yisrael is relying on the rains. We don't have any natural reservoirs. And it's good for the community. It's good for the klal. It's good for everyone else. So when one person is walking on the way and is having a difficult time traversing with his wagon, with his boots, with his sandals, that he may pray, oh, it shouldn't rain today because I have to go to this place. So the Kohen Gadol prays that God does not listen to that person. So he says, Bir tefillah Kohen Gadol, va'al yikansu tefilas oivrei drachim le'inyan hageshem. That the prayers of the ovrei drachim, which we're going to focus on, we said before hochei drachim, and now we're talking about ovrei drachim. Rabbi Yossi called them hochei derech, and he's saying, I'm afraid of the ovrei derech, the people who are just passing on the way. So the prayer of the Kohen Gadol is that the prayers of those people who pass on the way regarding rain should not be heard. Sheish shtei bechinot. There's 2 aspects to this. Aleph, nikra ovrei drachim. First of all, they're called ovrei drachim, passing the way. Shekol matarat libo rak lavo lohagia limchos chefza. Their whole goal, their whole desire of their heart is just to reach from point A to point B. Nothing on the way matters to them. They just want to get their heart's desire, and that's their way. V'derech hu ratz And the way is to run until they reach their place. Nothing's going to stop them. Bet. The second aspect, we call Nikre Hoche Drachim. Right? Rabbi Yossi himself said, I'm Hoche Derech, and I'm afraid of the Oivre Derech. What is Hoche Derech? That is, Shiodea, Shivachoma Kom Asher Tidro Kaf Raglav. They know, they're conscious, aware of every step they take. Hine Hashem Machim Tzadam. God prepares their footsteps. L'man yitaken sham eza nitutz kodesh hashayich le'nishmato. In order to fix, repair any type, what do? There's a, L'man yitaken sham, in order to fix there on the way, eza nitutz kodesh, some type of spark, a holy spark, which is shayich le'nishmato, that might be relating to their own soul. It could be their own fixing. It could be the fixing of something external. Ze ikar mahocho. That's their whole purpose in their walking, in their going. Rak shesam lo Hashem yitbarach siba limchos chetzo. It was only an excuse. God placed a reason for him to go to point B. I need to get to the doctors, but guess what? Every step on the way is meaningful. Every person I meet, every interaction I have is meaningful. Am Yisrael derech hilacho b'chol makamot. In order they should travel this certain way, it's in any way they go. Adei yisham, until they actually reach there. So everything is meaningful on the way. L'zemar, and this says in Tehillim, in Psalms, Lamed Zayin Kav Gimel, Me Hashem, it's from Hashem, mitzadei gever konenu. It's the footsteps that God prepares. But regarding man, and he delighted on his way. So God is actually delighted if a man understands that God is preparing the way. Shehem hochei drachim. These are the people who are hochei derech. They're going on their way. They're not passing by. So for that, psach hagashim ba'avoro. Remember, the Kohen Gadol is only praying that the Ovrei Drachim are not heard. But the Hochei Derech, no problem. I lost my place. I did skip something. V'yal habechina hazo shenikrim Hochei Drachim. And because of this, the pasuk in Tehillim, that's why they're called Hochei Drachim. Lo t'pil Kohen Gadol. That's the Kohen Gadol does not pray that the Hochei Derech is not listened to. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, he prayed, and God prevented the rain. Because of this aspect that he was Hochei Derech. Shem Hochei Drachim, Pasuk HaGeshem B'Avoro. So the rain would stop on his account. L'zeh Amar, and that you can see in Tehillim, Kuf Yotes, that's 119, Aleph, Ashrei Tmimei Derech, happy are those who are upright in their way. Hochim b'Torah Hashem. Hochim. They go in the way of the Lord. In the law of the Lord. Nimsa, Midas HaTzadikim. It comes out that the character trait, the attribute that we attribute to tzaddikim, to righteous people, pious people, afilu k'shiyotzu l'derech b'shvil esek gashmi, even when they're going out for physical, secular work, right? Gam ha'aminim ki esek zeh haya sibuk me'Hashem. They believe, they understand, they have faith that this work they're doing is caused and reasoned out by God Himself. Kedei sheyochel derech zeh, so they should go along a certain path. V'yilkatu misham nitzitzei kedusha, so they should pick up along the way holy sparks. V'chein elu nikroim hochei drachim. That's why they're called hochei drachim, passers on the way. Walkers of the way. Ava'osam she'ein lehem emunah zu, but those that lack this faith, hein nikroim oivrei drachim. They're the ones who are just passing by. V'chein Rabbi Yossi, as the story said, me'achar she'hoya mesu hochei drachim. He was of the type who was a hochei derech. Nimsas halichato b'derech hashuva l'dvar mitzvah. That it comes out that his walking, the process of going, it was considered a mitzvah. He was considering to do a mitzvah because that's what he does. Al kain lo chash l'nezikim hamizdamnim liyos min hachorva. That's why he was able to go into the chorva. He wasn't concerned or worried about, I know this is a little strange, we'll call them damagers or demons. He wasn't worried. Not from the possible of being damaged, not and not because of the possibility of the ruins of the walls falling down either. That's why the language he actually used was, one time when I was going on the way. Mahalech daike. It specifically uses the word mahalech. Kolomar lo yiti mesug oivrei drachim. Rabbi Yossi is saying, I'm not from those who just want to get from point A to point B. El masug mahalche. But from the right sug, the right type that just wants to experience life and metakein everything that comes my way. Shiti ma'amin she halikti ba'oto derech. That I believe that I was going in this way, b'shvil birur nitzutze kedusha, in order to clarify, in order to raise up, in order to collect the holy sparks. Shnimsa ani oisek mitzvah, because I'm involved in a mitzvah. L'chak niknasti l'chor ba'achas. That's why I was able to go into this particular ruin. What else are you going to go into a ruin for, if not to uplift and to raise the sparks? Lo chashashti min hanizikim shalah. And I had no concern for the damage that normally comes to people that go into these places. Because there's a special concept, an important concept. Shluchei mitzvah ain't a nizikim. People who are walking on the way to do mitzvahs are not damaged. This comes very well to explain, to answer up, another examination. Mash amar achakach, what was said afterwards, mityare ani shema yafsikuni oivrei drachim. Rabbi Yossi was a little bit afraid, a little bit of fear, that perhaps that these people who were going to be oivrei drarech, who were passing him by, would interrupt him. Now it doesn't say holchei drachim, it says oivrei drachim. Kasher nokit al atzmo tchila, like he mentioned about himself earlier on, oivrei, Hayiti mahalech b'derech, I was mahalech. Lo rahiti oiver b'derech. Right? He's not using that terminology. So this all comes out well. Kiyamar, when he said, Ein ani mityare minoto shehem mesugei mahalchei drachim. Right? He was not afraid of anybody who's holchei derech like him. Ki eluhem tzadikim, t'mimim. These people are righteous and they're straight and they're on the right path. So since if they would come across me and they would see me praying, lo yafsukuni, those people would not stop. They wouldn't interrupt me. Because nothing would hold them back. They have faith, they have emunah, they have passion. They know that every step they take is meaningful. So nothing's going to hold them back. Shrikum lahamtinli. And they would wait for me. They wouldn't pass by me or interrupt me. Ki elu ma'aminim me'ashem tzadei gever kanru. Because these people understand that every step that is taken is to raise sparks, is founded by God, was placed there ahead of time. Kol naseh b'hashkachat pratit b'naz Hashem. Everything is done with the divine providence of God. Ach mityare ani min otam shehem oivrei drachim. But Rabbi Yossi was a little bit afraid of those who weren't on that level. They were oivrei drachim. All they want to do is get from point A to point B. V'heim hamoni. I don't know if that means many or heretics, but we'll assume they were many. V'hein choshishim al asher yifsakuni. And they're not going to be so concerned. They're going to go ahead and they're going to interrupt me. Gam Elohim maherim v'hiluchim kedei hagia limchos cheptzam yofa sha'achas kodem. And all they're concerned about is getting there as quick as possible in order to reach their heart's desire at a good time, as I mentioned, as soon as possible. L'chein yafsakuni kedei limaher v'halaktam. So they just want to get to point. They just want to get their heart's desires as quickly as possible. So now try to imagine living your life always in the now. looking for the holy sparks to raise everywhere you go. Not just internally, mostly internally, because we have to, as the Vilna Gaon said, it's about tikkun hamidot, we have to work on ourselves, but also who we can help along the way. Wouldn't the world be a very different place? Again, we mentioned in Rav Gav's shiur the definition of love. And this is Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal, his idea of how his understanding of the Rambam, that love is the feeling one derives when they focus on the positive virtues of another person. So what would happen if you're cognizant of the fact that everyone around you that you interact with, interface with, was created in the image of God? I mean, the world would be a different place. We know ISIS wouldn't exist. That would be the easy one. This is a little bit of a downer, because if we're having a definition, the definition we're starting with was, as Rabbi Benazi said, that God created us in His image. Unfortunately, and we probably have gone through periods in our lives where we've created our own gods based on our image. And many religions, there's a lot of false religions out there, who basically have created God in their image, a human God. I know it's a very sharp comment to make, but we have to rework our definition of God. So I mentioned earlier about TM, and someone said maybe it means transcendental meditation. So I'm going to tell you, it means Torah and mitzvahs. So Torah will help us hopefully get a clearer idea of God, the creator of the universe. And the mitzvahs are what we're trying to do to fix ourselves, fix the world. And before I go into that, I want to tell you a famous story. This is a famous Hasidic story about Rav Zusha. I'm sure you've all heard it before, but perhaps there's one of you who hasn't, and I'm happy to tell it again. So a certain man came to the Maggid of Mezrich. He had difficulties understanding what the Torah tells us, that one should bless God for the bad just as he blesses God for the good. He had a hard time understanding that, and perhaps we also have a hard time at times. So a holy Maggid said to him that he should go find his disciple Rav Zusha of Anapoli. So he went and he found Rav Zusha. The pious Rav Zusha received him warmly, invited him into his home. When the guest came in, he saw how poor Rav Zusha was. The house was in ruins. They had no food, almost nothing to eat. They were beset with afflictions and illnesses. Nevertheless, what was it about Rav Zusha? He always had a smile. He had an upbeat, he was always happy and cheerful. So the guest was astonished at this picture. He couldn't understand. The Maggid sent him this guy, this holy Rav Zusha, and so he said to him, yeah, I went to the Maggid. I asked him, how is it possible to bless God for the bad, just as we bless Him for the good? He said to Rav Zusha, the Maggid told me, only you can help me. So what do you think Rav Zusha's response was? He says, that's an interesting question. Why did the holy Rebbe send you to me? How would I know? He should have sent you to someone who was suffering, right? Me? Right? Let me ask you a question. We all know in Pirkei Avos says, who is Ashir? Who's rich? Someone who is happy with his lot. Who, and this is Ben Zoma. I think, here it is. He appreciates what he has. And part of the Mishnah explains a pasuk in Psalms, in Tehillim. We started out by explaining one of the important principles here is Lefum Tsar Agra. According to the effort is the result, is the reward. Psalms 182:2 says, if you eat the toil of your hands, fortunate are you, and good is to you. Fortunate are you in this world, and good is to you in the world to come. I want to mention about the way we look at the world. It's all about, for those that came in late, we mentioned that there's nature. That's first nature, meaning that many people are happy because of genetics. There are many people that are not. And it takes what we call life choices, and we're going to call that second nature. So there's certain things that we have intrinsically as Jews. We're intrinsically grateful. In fact, we're called Yehudim. Why are we called Yehudim? Because some say because Yehuda was the largest tribe. Some say because Yehuda was the largest remnant that still exists. But the truth is, if you look at Leah's, in the Torah, when Leah names Yehuda, we had 4 mothers, right? And there were going to be 12 tribes, and they all had Ruach HaKodesh. They all were instilled with the Holy Spirit. They had prophecy, and they knew that they were the 4 mothers. So you have 12 tribes. Each mother was supposed to have 3 children. When Leah had her 4th child, she realized she had much more than was coming to her, and she was extremely grateful for that. And she called his name Yehuda. So we mentioned earlier about TM. We're going to now define it as Torah and mitzvahs. This is the catalyst towards a more meaningful life. The Torah is the guide, and the mitzvahs are the 613 ways to connect. Now here's something very interesting. The word mitzvah, people translate as commandment. It doesn't only mean commandment. In fact, in Gemara Brachos we came across the word tzaveh. Tzaveh, which is the root of mitzvah, means to connect, to become lechaber. Okay, and we think about every time we do a mitzvah, we're connecting to the Almighty. But there's something also very fascinating, because we're trying to, right? Yibaneh wants to encourage people to do mitzvahs, to do chesed. I thought about this with Chabad. Chabad does a tremendous job. They get people to put on tefillin. So what is it about tefillin? Is it a central mitzvah? It could have been any mitzvah. Every mitzvah you do is intertwined with every other mitzvah. By putting on tefillin, you're actually accomplishing and starting every other one of the 613 mitzvahs. Any mitzvah you do is the same. Okay? There's another idea, right? The reward for one mitzvah is another mitzvah, or mitzvah goreret mitzvah. What does that mean, mitzvah goreret mitzvah? The Maharal explains, of course it's goreret mitzvah, because when you do one mitzvah, you're automatically starting, like when you're starting a lawnmower, and you're pulling the string, you're getting it warmed up. I mean, it may not be humming at the highest, most powerful speed, but you're getting it, you're touching upon every mitzvah when you just do one mitzvah. And it's from the word mechaber, from the word mitzvah itself. So, interestingly enough, we're going to start talking about different mitzvahs. I mentioned there were a lot of mitzvahs here that we're going to talk about that are only applicable to men. But again, no matter what mitzvah you do, you're getting all of them. So, one of the ideas is about brachot, right? We can all put a lot more into our brachot and our tefillot and our prayers, and this will help us with our own sense of gratitude towards the Almighty and towards others. Just the word bracha alone, well, let me say, the word bracha means like a baruch. It's like the spring, the source, where everything is flowing out of. Okay? So also the word itself is beit, resh, kaf. Bet is like the number 2, kaf is the number 20, and resh is 200. So you have a series of numbers that are all 2. 2 means an increase. 1 is singular, 2 has this concept of increase. And that's what a bracha is. It's a heightening of the holiness of the object and in the person. We mentioned about raising the sparks. Everything you do, why rush to a bracha? Why not say it out loud so another person can say amen? It says the person saying amen is even greater than the one who said the bracha. Imagine what you're doing when you're whispering under your breath. You're robbing someone else of an opportunity. So when the bracha is made on an object, you're elevating it spiritually. It fulfills its higher purpose and in existence by having a mitzvah done through it. Additionally, the person who performs the mitzvah is also elevating himself. So what better way of showing gratitude than constantly saying blessings? I just want to stop here for tell you about my wife and I during Havdalah. Havdalah is a blessing. So I learned this, I used to work for the Sephardic Educational Center in the Old City. and Rabbi Ben Arosh, Rav Yosef Ben Arosh, he taught me a lot. And one of the things they do, the Sephardim, they interrupt. It's not really an interruption, but in the middle of the Havdalah service, they start making blessings for sick people and for people in need of parnasa, and people in need of shidduchim, and they start just blessing each other. And I just found it fascinating and wonderful, and we've adopted that. There's another thing the Sephardim do, also inserted here as well, and that is that they laugh at what is Havdalah? It's starting a whole new week. So the first opportunity, right after the bracha, Brei Prigafen, they laugh. If you've ever been to a Sephardi minyan from Motzi Shabbat, or a host, you'll see it. I suggest seeing it and adopting this. It's not forbidden for an Ashkenazi to do such a thing. So why do they do this? So he told me it brings, why not? Every beginning, right? All beginnings are tough, right? We know that. So the very first moment, the seed of the new week should start with brachot, which we already did, and laughter. Laughter is a tremendous healing effect. And interesting, also Rabbi Per from Shir Chadash, he gave over a drasha that I remember so clearly, and he talked about the advantage of laughter for no reason, right? Let's say in Judaism we know that sinat chinam, hatred for no reason, is worse than hatred for a reason. That's the reason for the destruction of the temple, right? And love for no reason is greater than love for a reason, and that's what's going to bring about the redemption. So too, in scientific research, they also found that laughter therapy works. Laughter, if you laugh at a joke, that's called laughing for a reason. That's not as great, it's not as powerful as laughter for no reason, right? Laughter for no reason has a greater effect. And when you smile, right, there's enzymes and there's chemicals that are released in your body. And the scientists have picked up on that. And that also is very healthy. Beis Shammai, we all know Beis Shammai, we don't possibly like him in most cases, it's like Beis Hillel. We always think of Beis Hillel as the happy-go-lucky guy. And Beis Shammai is the kind of like stern, cruel, harsh rulings. What does it say about Beis Shammai? He always had a smile on him. Meet everybody with a panim yafis, right? We have to understand that we have to rethink sometimes our thinking. Anyway, so we're talking about brachos. I mean, what happens when you wake up in the morning? You do realize that not everyone wakes up. I mean, how great. I mean, okay, the older you get, the more painful it might get. But how great it is you feel the pain, that you're alive, and you can take a deep breath, and that, the sun rays are coming in through the window, or you hear the birds chirping, or just the colors that you can see when you're walking to shul, to work, wherever it is you might go. And it's just a fascinating world that we live in. And we should really appreciate that and take advantage of the brachas that we make. And Jews make a lot of brachas. When we take a piece of fruit and just examine it, how is this made? Where did it come from? And sometimes it's like from another part of the world, if it's not the season. It's just amazing what goes into producing the fruit by Hashem, and whether it might be bread, the production of your wife or the bakery. So obviously taking brachos more seriously will help us with our own sense of gratitude. Now prayer. So what I'm going to mention sounds like it's a mitzvah for everybody, not just for men. But are we running to the synagogue? Do you run to shul? Do you feel like your steps are a little quicker when you're going to shul than when you're leaving? Right? This is something that prayer itself is the medicine. When we talked about Yom Tov Glazer in the beginning, that we have these different voices that sabotage our relationships, the stories we tell ourselves. Okay? So, what is prayer? Right? We think it's just requests, it's just asking for things. It's not at all that. In Hebrew, prayer is litpalel. Plil is investigation, is clarity. It's to judge. It's to make decisions, to constantly sort things out, truth from false. right? Even those voices in our head that are trying to convince us, right? We think that this is going to make the relationship better, and really it's just sabotaging it. In the Siddur, Avodas Halev, and I quote what he says, prayer is the soul's yearning to define what truly matters and to ignore the trivialities that often masquerade as essential. I mean, this is a real special time when you pray. Not just to read the words real quick, as soon as, get it over with. It's nothing like that. There's preparation that goes that's involved. The Talmud tells us that the early Rishonim, the early pious people, they would take a whole hour just to prepare for prayer. And we do it in about 12, 15 minutes with Psukta Zimra, right? And then they take an hour to come down from that high place. So I don't know, that's like 9 hours a day, because we pray 3 times a day, whether they work. So I guess the quality of their work and the bracha that came must have been pretty high. So even if we're going to spend 15, 20 minutes 3 times a day, we can really put more meaning into it. So we define prayer, right? And that is just as essential to our emotional and spiritual and mental well-being as one would need to eat 3 times a day. The happiness gurus, all these research institutes, they all agree. Prayer, faith was number 1 on the list. That's going to help in your long-term happiness. So there's something else. We think of prayer as bein adam le makom. It's just a mitzvah between me and God. It's not that. I shouldn't say it's not that at all. It's not only that. Interestingly enough, when you show up at a minyan, at a quorum, where there's 9 other people waiting for you, what you do to help those other 9 people's prayers get higher is unbelievable. I suggest going to the Maharal. He explains what the number 10 represents. I don't think we have time to go into that. But what happens is, and by women, I'll just lay it on the cards, lay the cards out on the table, that women, as we mentioned earlier, are just happier than men. They're just more connected, and they don't need those 9 other people to help elevate their personal prayer. But what are we doing? Ben Adam L'Chavera. When we show up and we're that 10th guy, we're the 100th guy, right? We're actually, it's easier when you talk about it like you're the 10th guy. You're taking everyone else's tefillahs and helping to boost them. And everyone else is doing that for you. So it's a Ben Adam L'Chavera. It's between man and man. These are mitzvahs of showing up in shul, coming to synagogue on time, and it's a real chesed that you're doing. Because as we see, the prayer is helpful in clarifying someone's well-being, their mental state, their emotional state, their spiritual state. If I asked you, what is the greatest transgression? The Torah tells us what? The greatest sin, the greatest transgression, the greatest mistake one can make. Any volunteers for any answer? I don't want to embarrass anybody because it's a little bit counterintuitive. So it says in Devarim 28:45, the curses, these horrible things are going to happen to us. All these curses are going to come upon us and pursue us. The enemies are going to come with the curses. They're going to pursue us, to overtake us till we're destroyed, because you didn't listen to God, to observe His commandments and all the decrees He commanded us. These horrible curses are going to be a sign and a wonder, and for your offspring forever, because you did not, here it is, because you did not serve Hashem your God amid gladness and gladness of heart when everything was abundant, when things were good. We were not happy in our hearts. I want to read the right. We did not, lo avadat es Hashem Elokecha, you did not serve Lord your God, besimcha, with joy, betuv levav, or with a gladdened heart, with a good heart, merov kol, when everything was abundant, everything was great. And the next couple verses, they slaughter us, right? We're going to end up serving the enemies, and that God sends to us in hunger and thirst and nakedness, and it's just not good. So, this is a happiness seminar. We're not supposed to get depressed. That this is, what does it mean, avodas Hashem? Here, right? You didn't serve Hashem. Lo avadata, with our hearts. What's avodas halev? What's the service of the heart? Everybody knows it's prayer. In our prayer, we were not happy. And I'm sad to say, maybe there's certain synagogues you may go into and the people don't look so happy. Try, like we said, there's faith, family, and community. Find the shul. There's plenty out there. Plenty in this neighborhood. Nitzanim, we're standing in one of them. You have the Emek Learning Center. You have Shir Chadash. You have Ramban. You have Yedidia. You have Hildesheimer. You have all these shuls. And this community, something else Rav Noach also said. Sanity is contagious. Insanity is contagious. If you hang out with unhappy people, people who talk Lashon Hara, and what do we say Lashon Hara is? It's talking, it's gossip, it's evil talk. How is it, what's the easiest way for me to lift myself up? Just put the other guy down. No work involved. Well, I might have to pay for it later, but that's the easy way. Remember I mentioned the Fum Tzara Agra. According to the effort is the reward. Go to the effort, find the community, find the shul, find the group of people who are into tikkun hamidot, into fixing themselves and becoming better people. I just want to talk about a few more mitzvahs. We have a few more minutes. And interestingly enough, we talk about avodah shebalev, the service of the heart. Tefillin, that's not the word that's used in the Torah. It's totafot, right? So tefillin, it's a rabbinical word apparently that refers and relates to tefillah. So this is something that we actually wear, should be wearing all day long. At least we wear them during tefillah. And what do they do for us? Interestingly enough, I have an article. Before I discuss the article a little bit, I'll mention what the article says. This is published in the Journal of Chinese Medicine. It's number 70, October 2002. And the title is Tefillin, an ancient acupuncture point prescription for mental clarity. It describes over 50 acupuncture points that the tefillin and the straps use as having substantial influence on the mind and the spirit. Now, I don't know all the jargon that's used here, and perhaps someone else does, but it's a very interesting article, and you can find it online if you type in Google Journal of Chinese Medicine, number 70, October 2002. I'll give a quick quote. The governing vessel, which is Dumai, is an extraordinary meridian that runs up the spine and penetrates the brain. It's well known for its ability to treat psychiatric disorders and influence the mind. The spiritual action of points on the governing vessel can be explained because it has the closest relation with the brain, which according to pre-interclassic and later Doastic traditions is considered to be the seat of the spirit. A further connection of the governing vessel to spirit is found from its anterior pathway, which directly connects it to the more traditional home of the spirit, the heart. So we know, right, it says it's going to be totafos between your eyes, which not exactly between your eyes, but somehow in the forehead, over here, and there's a knot in the back, and on your arm. These are placed in actually the most vulnerable places, right? It's placed, you would think, on your strong arm, because it says this is to remind you about what? You're leaving Egypt. We said Shabbos reminds you, all the Hagim, so many things, right? So too, tefillin is to remind you of that God took you out of Egypt, which we, again, just to remind you about our own personal Mitzrayim, our own personal constricted places. So just to remind you of that, and it's put on the most vulnerable places, perhaps to penetrate, or perhaps to protect. I'm not sure, perhaps both. The most vulnerable places need protection, but they're the most easiest to penetrate, and therefore these are acupuncture points that bring what we call spiritual ecstasy. So, and also clarity, mental clarity. Where's the tefillin? Put on that soft spot that we all had when we were a baby, and on your weak arm. But not just any place on your arm, directly across from your heart. Interestingly enough, something I thought about, and actually I'll just read the verses because it's interesting about the mitzvah of wearing tefillin. Right? It says, "And it shall be for you a sign upon your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand did the Lord bring you out of Egypt." And another verse, "And it shall be a sign upon your hand and a totvos between your eyes. For with a mighty hand did," that's Exodus 13:9, and the other one is 13. Exodus 13:16. Another mitzvah, just to put this into perspective, also tzitzit, the tassels, the strings that we wear. It's also mentions, right, the idea of leaving Egypt. But interestingly enough, as we mentioned earlier, that all the mitzvahs are connected. And just looking at these strings are supposed to remind us about all of the 613 mitzvahs. And at the end of the paragraph that talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis, and then putting on the blue thread, and you'll see it, and remember all of the Lord's commandments and keep them, not straying after your heart or after your eyes. Remember, this is your heart, this is your mind, where the eyes are, and your heart. These are to protect you, to remind you constantly. And the rest of the verse says, and thus you will be reminded to keep all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. And another, just the idea that it's called an oat. An oat is a sign. So you have the letter shin here, and you have, right on the box itself, you have a shin protruding out of each side. You have a knot in the back, which is the dalet, and you have a yud, a knot of the yud on your arm. But it's supposed to be an oat. So what's the word oat? It's an aleph, and a vav, and a taf. The aleph always, right, the letter 1, the number 1, aleph always represents God, oneness, singularity, unity. 400 in this case, taf, the last letter, 4 always represents the physical world, the 4 directions that are surrounding us. The vav is always mechaber, not always, but in this case. So the vav is connecting the aleph and the taf. We are to elevate ourselves spiritually and physically and be able to connect and be whole, consciously, spiritually conscious people. And that's what the tefillin does, and that's also, to a certain extent, what the tzitzis does. So something, I want to just end with one little piece about the tefillin, something I thought of, and that is, when you look at the tefillin, you have a shin. There's a shin I mentioned. But a shin or a sin, it doesn't matter, there's no dot. And where is it sitting? It's sitting on the moach. It's sitting on the brain. So you look at the shin and the moach, and you put those together, it's simeach, simcha. And hopefully we wear our tefillin and we go to shul and we think about and have a real sense of gratitude, and we clarify all the, I want to call it ghosts and voices, and have real clarity and be besimcha. Again, I just want to stress, choosing a community is very important. Judging others favorably is probably one of the most important factors. There's a commandment in the Torah, B'tzedek tishpot amitecha, you shall judge your people favorably. When you see people and you know they're creating the image of God, there's got to be something. I know you've run into people that just, it's really hard to find something. But try it. Try to think, you know, they must have done a mitzvah. They might have been kind to somebody once in their life, right? Try. It'll make a big difference in your own life. So we see the foundation is, we're talking to midos, trying to improve yourself, knowing that we're not perfect and there's a lot of work to do. And I just want to end by thanking you all for coming, and we have a lot of other activities. Again, Yivaneh is based on the idea of trying to empower, encourage the community to do more mitzvahs. So there's 2 aspects. We organize many different activities. We have, honey, do you want to mention what they are? Okay, I'll mention. So we've already done some activities with Yad Eliezer. We're planning more. You go onto our website and sign up. With the victims of terror, we're having some activities with them this coming month as well. And then we have the educational side. So we started off with our seminar on happiness, and I'm glad that you all came. And for those who missed the first 2 sessions, on our website we have Rav Gav and we have Yom Tov Laser. And we're going to be doing many other educational activities. Of course, we'll have Shabbos meals. We're going to have group meals. And we have next Tuesday night, if I'm not mistaken, Tu B'Shvat. It'll be a real blast. I encourage you to join us, sign up, because the deadline is just in a few days. My wife and I have to prepare a lot. Rabbi Trugman is unbelievable. He's great. He's going to be running the Seder with me. And I've been doing these, it's not the first time, and we're really looking forward to having a good time and sharing the wealth. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Scott.